Over the centuries, there have been many bizarre and brutal ways of executing condemned criminals. In Roman times, prisoners were even forced to fight lions without any weapons or protection, and this would lead to their deaths. Also in the medieval times, some of the most savage execution methods included hanging, drawing and quartering, and beheading by axe. In the Tudor period, Mary I would get a reputation for burning Protestants at the stake, but one of the most fearsome and horrifying methods of execution used was being buried alive. Premature burial, or live burial, involved a condemned person being either interred in the ground or being locked in a structure to suffer. Join us today as we look at this brutal execution method, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Being buried alive would cause death through either suffocation, dehydration, starvation, or even hypothermia. However, whilst interred underground, someone could last some time, and this would result in someone dying rather slowly, as opposed to other methods of execution. This would be torture, as someone would have a significant amount of time to comprehend their death and imminent demise, and this would have been horrific psychological pain. It is a common fear being buried alive, and has been used for centuries. Inside of China, the burning of books and burying of scholars was carried out by the first emperor of unified China. In this persecution, hundreds of books and texts, deemed too progressive, were burned, and also 460 Confucian scholars were buried alive in the year 212 BC. There have been doubts whether this actually happened, or whether it was just propaganda, but German tribes would also use burial alive. They would tie a victim to a wicker frame, would then push them down in the mud and bury them, causing them to suffocate. It was even debated that the execution method was used in England during the Dark Ages, and ancient Persia used the custom too. It was said, "It is a Persian custom to bury people alive, for I have heard that a mistress, having grown old, caused 14 children of the best families in Persia to be buried alive, to show her gratitude to God, who is said to be underneath the earth." So here it was used as a method of sacrifice, but one execution method linked to the practice was immurement. This was when someone would be walled in alive, and a group who was subject to this was the Vestal Virgins, who when they broke their vow of celibacy, they were immured alive and buried inside the city of Rome. They were held inside subterranean cells, and were then left to perish and suffer, and there were 10 accounts of the women being immured for breaking their vows. Elizabeth Bathory, the Hungarian countess, who is linked to Vlad the Impaler, was immured inside of a number of rooms in 1610. She was sentenced to this as she was deemed a murderer who possibly had hundreds of victims. 4 years after her immurement was sealed, she died inside of the rooms, but was supplied with food. Inside of Denmark, in a city statue, there was a female robber who was buried alive, and it was said in Danish law that adulterous women were punished in this way. But inside of the Roman Empire, there were many offences that could lead to someone being buried alive. These include infanticide and murder, and female murderers risked the punishment. There was one example in 1505 in Germany of a 13-year-old girl being buried alive beneath the gallows, where a 12-year-old boy was being hanged. Further burials continued throughout the centuries. For example, 10 women were subject to this in Berlin, and also one woman was even impaled through the heart after her burial. This combination of live burial and impalement was used specifically in Nuremberg, but was deemed too brutal, and instead the local council changed their method of execution to drowning. It was said in one execution, the verdict commanded the executioner to place the perpetrator in the grave alive, and place 2 layers of thorns, the one beneath, the other above her. Prior to that he should place a bowl over her face, in which he had made a hole, and to give her through that a reed or tube in the mouth, then jump 3 times upon her, and lastly cover her with earth. In the 1500s in the Habsburg Netherlands, the Catholic Church tried to eradicate any Protestant influence inside the country. To do this they used live burial as a method to punish women who were found guilty of heresy, and the last of these women executed took place in 1597. It was said that when this lady's head was above ground, she was given a chance to recant her faith, and when she refused to do so, she was covered up and died. This execution caused huge protest at the time, and forced the authorities to calm the persecution down, switching to using fines to punish heretics rather than death. Russia also used burial alive, and they called it the pit. Women who murdered their husbands were thrown into the pit, and there were many other accounts throughout the centuries of people being buried alive. The Khmer Rouge used this practice as a form of execution in the killing fields, and during Chairman Mao's regime it was also used. The fear of burial alive was even utilised by the mafia, and during the Second World War there were large-scale atrocities committed by the Japanese army. They buried dozens of people alive during the Nanking massacre, and the Germans also used this against Jews in Ukraine and Belarus, as they committed huge persecution and killings on the Eastern Front. As mentioned, one common fear is being buried alive, and throughout history it's been used a large number of times by many different countries. It would have been a horrific way to go, as slowly someone would be suffocating, and they would be aware of what was happening to them. As each spade of earth was placed on top of someone, they would be closer to their fate. Immurement was also incredibly terrifying, and being walled in was another form of this execution, which was savage. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.